Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. Welcome to today's Catheta webinar live on September 26th. For those of you who don't already know, Catheta means learning in Creek. And in that respect, today we're going to be learning about tribal housing professionalism, specifically your resume skills from Marie Bonville. My name is Brooke Warrington. I'm the Training and Development Specialist here at the Native Learning Center, and we're so thrilled that you could join us today. Please follow along as I read the disclaimer aloud. This webinar provides a summary of fundamental concepts, requirements, and/or procedures within the allotted 90 minutes. The material discussed does not illustrate all possible scenarios that could be applicable. And we have also included a copyright infringement disclaimer. Just please note that anything of the presentation that you see today does count as materials, and the materials are protected by copyright, trademark, trade secret, and other intellectual property laws. So just something to keep in mind. Before we get started, I do want to familiarize you with some of the features available and how the environment works. So if you look at the top of your screen, you'll see an icon of either a person with their hand raised or just a hand. With that icon, you could either raise your hand, agree, disagree, or step away. Now your screen should look similar to this graphic here. We have a box for files, and here we have some handouts for today, action verbs for resumes, as well as an Indian Housing Development Handbook. So please feel free to download a copy of these items for yourself. Simply click the item you'd like to download, then click the arrow pointing downwards to download it onto your device. Once the item is downloaded, it should appear in your device's download section. If you do wish to have a copy of a PDF of the presentation, just please email us at the NLC to request it, and we will get that sorted for you. The second box labeled web links is where you'll find our survey about today's webinar, along with any other links that'll be seen throughout today's presentation. Finally, to the right of the screen, we have a chat box available. This is how you'll communicate with the instructor and the NLC staff. If you have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to interact by using the chat box. Simply type your message and hit enter, or click the up arrow icon button to submit. We encourage class participation, so feel free to write in those questions or comments. You can also come here for tech support issues. Know that most could be solved by just exiting and re-entering the meeting room. Let's all go ahead and try out the chat box together by typing in your name, where you're joining us from, and your tribal affiliation. All right, folks, and with that, it is with great pleasure that I introduce today's webinar instructor, Marie Bonville. And Marie, I will hand it off to you now.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate the introduction. Thank you to the Native Learning Center for having me back. So today we're going to jump right in. Thank you for putting your name and where you work in the chat area there. We've got a small enough group to where I hope to have a lot of engagement with you all in the chat area. So thank you for that. A little bit about me. I started my career with the Seminole Tribe of Florida in 2007. I've held several positions that surrounded the work of professional development in higher education and also adult vocational administration. As Director of Training and Technical Assistance for the Native Learning Center, of course, we had the hires of training staff, creative types, graphic designers, etc. And then, of course, management. So, for me, it's more so the balance of knowing what the industry needs are, right, with the staff that we select, and then also to knowing what the changes are in this current environment. Last time I did this training was 2 years ago. And even in this last 2 years, what has changed by way of resume writing that first 90 days, for example, it has changed quite a bit. So I'm glad that we're back and we're talking about it. So on average, research shows that it takes at least 20 to 30 applications just to get one interview. You are being placed in an algorithm setting. In most cases, resumes are not being read by the hiring recruiter, manager, at first glance, it's usually something that's helping the technology that we have today helps your resume rise to the top, right? If it's written well enough. And so a resume is that document that summarizes your education, employment, experiences, the things that make you qualified for the position. That's what we want to see first and foremost. So we'll discuss what's kind of changed over the last couple years. I've got something we can put in the chat area. If you want to put the last time you've written a resume in the chat, that'd be interesting to see. That would give me a kind of a good idea of where I want to head with some of our conversation. So in regards to the objectives for today, we're definitely going to review your basic resume and cover letter do's and don'ts. We're going to talk about the tools that are there and available to you all, many of which you've been using already. I will say that most people are skeptical of some of the tools, and I'll just say, well, in many cases we've been using them and didn't know it, right? So there's that. And then also common questions and resume mistakes that people might have. And with a group this quaint, we'll be able to really get into some specifics, hopefully help you out with that. So, oh, good. We got some recent folks, 2 weeks, 1 month. So definitely mistakes, if any were made, are a great source of learning as well. So you can dust off that resume, or in your case, pull up, because it's readily available, your last resume, so that we can look at it. The other thing, in addition to um, getting hired, right? Not even hired. I mean, at the resume stage, you're just trying to get an interview. But I will say that one of the other reasons to dust off your resume might not be what you think. In many cases, we're all working in tribal housing or in tribal community development or some sort of client services based industry where grants are huge, right? It's the way we can leverage our resources. So new grants sometimes require that they have a list of staff and they have, staff capacity. So they'll ask you for your grant writers will ask you for your resume so they can pull out the things that are necessary to show staff capacity, right? So there's that. If you're in homeownership education, which a lot of my trainings are based out of that, sometimes it's helpful. There are things that are required um, of the home ownership application, right? The loan itself that may require renters or people seeking home ownership to know, gosh, I don't know when I started this job. I don't know when I left, right? Maybe there's 3 or 4 jobs that they've had over a span of 2 years. So, and maybe to their benefit to have a resume already updated. So just a little another take on why it might be important to do that. And then lastly, the emphasis on social media is that we also need to clean up our profiles. There are recruiters that do go straight to your social media to kind of learn more about you, and so we have to pay attention to that as well. So I thought this was kind of neat. There was a position for a planetary protection officer via NASA, and a little boy wrote in, and this is what he had to say. My name is Jack Davis, and I would like to apply for the planetary protection officer. I may be 9, but I think I would be a good fit for the job. One of the reasons is that my sister says I'm an alien. Also, I've seen almost all the space and alien movies I can see. So I've also seen the show Marvel Agents of Shield and hope to see the movie Men in Black. So he's not actually old enough to see it just yet. I am great at video games. I'm young, and so I can learn to think like an alien. Sincerely, Jack Davis, Guardian of the Galaxy, 4th grade. I love this because he actually got a response back from NASA, but he had a lot of the same elements that we look for in a resume. He explained exactly why he thinks he's a good fit for the job. He demonstrates some of his skills, and also that there's a referral, right? His sister can vouch for his abilities, but I just thought it was neat. And NASA did respond. It's a little fuzzy here, so I went ahead and provided the link. But I think if Jack can get it, we can too, right? That the purpose of the resume is that it's a marketing tool. It's meant to show that you are certainly the person for the job. Pre-screening they're not necessarily going to hire you off of the resume. This is definitely one of those things where you're going for that interview opportunity, right? So to gain those interviews, you have to demonstrate capacity. I know that it can be hard. Sometimes folks are saying, well, I haven't been in the workforce, or my skills, the skills that I have at, maybe I've been working from home for several years, or maybe I um, am moving in a different career uh, path, right? So these are some of these complicated things that we'll have to discuss to determine, well, how do you know a position is the right fit, and how can you demonstrate your knowledge, skills, and abilities, right? So a resume should have a clearly stated objective, whether that's expressed or implied, because not every resume template has an objective at the top. So you can have it expressed in an objective, or you can have it implied with the way in which you demonstrate these, and we call them KSAs, right? Knowledge, skills, and abilities for the position. Highlight your relevant employment experience for sure, and then list your relevant education and career achievements. Um, what you need to avoid, right? So off the bat, we're talking about avoiding. I personally like talking a lot. I love words. I value information, but I can also be too wordy. So right, we want to make sure we stay away from that. Salary info, unless it's expressly asked of you, maybe in the application, if you're filling out a job that has an application and it's asking for the salary information, that's one thing. But in a resume, typically you do not include that information. Reasons for leaving the job. It's not important to the interviewer to know why you left in terms of, you know, the personal aspect of it, right? So you might have had a stressful job and thought, you know what, I need to take a break. This place is stressing me out. That's a reason for leaving the job that you want to portray, right? So try to keep that off the resume if possible, unless when you get to the interview stage, for sure, that's a question that some folks might have, but there's answers for that as well. And I didn't say this at the beginning, but this is a 3-part series. So we are going to go from resume to interview, and then that first 90 days. So we're giving you the big picture here. Personal info, for sure. There are certain things that you would not include in a resume in terms of familial status, things of that nature. We'll get into some other personal information you would want to steer clear of. But then also generic references, right? So by that I mean, if you are interested in any job that they have open, I just need a job, folks, right? I mean, I think that that's not something you want to portray in your resume, and it makes sense. Inappropriate content, certainly, you may inadvertently do that just via your email or your social media accounts. So we'll talk about that as well. And then I've got an asterisk on printed on colored paper, because it's not industry practice at this time. Unless you're in a creative field, you would print on your standard printer paper, white printer paper. Now, I have seen, everything under the sun, and so I do know that there are positions that or hiring recruiters that would value that sort of creativity. But in most cases, especially in tribal housing, not to say we're dry, but it's just not something you're going to see at this time. So how to get started? Take a self-assessment, right? I'm big on self-assessment. Think of your past successes and achievements. Again, going back to having not been in the workforce for a period of time, maybe you're going from being a consultant to going back to a job within an organization. Maybe you're just getting out of college. There are so many different people in different stages in life, that it's really important to have an understanding of, well, what makes sense to me. And we start with taking an assessment to evaluate successes, achievements that are professional in nature, brainstorming all of the skills, experiences, accomplishments, and include all the work. This is, again, we're in the brainstorm stages, so you can add everything you think is of value. Don't worry about formatting, length, style. None of that matters just yet. You want to have all the background information so it's easier to group positions together. Because when you're going through this process, you're looking at, you might start with one position, but then you'll see that there are several others that may also be a good fit, right? If you're in the job hunt. So it's kind of good to brainstorm ahead of time and say to yourself, well, what categories can I put these in? So I have a generic brainstorming sheet here that starts with professional, then it goes into academic, campus. If you're just out of school or you're applying to an internship or something of that nature, then yeah, you would need to include that information as well. And I would say the personal area could be any other groups or organizations that volunteer work that you do, right? So it's not, as I said before, with personal information, there is a line between personal information and information that would benefit you in terms of the volunteer positions, etc. So there is a distinction there. Awards and recognitions. We're in the brainstorming stages, so it's fine to list them. We will talk about where it's best placed. Achievements, same thing. And then lastly, the skills, and we'll talk about soft skills, etc. in a little bit. So first, we have to talk about templates, right? We've got all this information. We've got a position we're interested in applying for, but how do we go about that? Now, first and foremost, most people are familiar with Word and its templates. If not, this is where, the tried and true professional of the last 15 years, is 20 years, has been going to Word to get this one template. And now they've got tons because they have competition. There's so many other resume builders that are out there. So for example, Canva. Canva can also get you inspired. That's their catchphrase. And they also have templates. What I will say about them both is that, as you can see in both of them, there are pictures, there are colors. This one could be considered all, a different color once it's printed out. You have to be careful. And the reason why is because these are appealing to you, right? They want you to get creative, but what does the hiring recruiter need to see? You're more than likely your resume is going to be scanned, and if so, how will it pick up all the information with all of these other graphics in the background? So you're looking for the right format as far as the template's concerned for the position. So that's the big takeaway there. Consider your target audience. Who's going to be reading your resume, right? Develop a job target and identify the audience and their love language. What do I mean by love language? If I am speaking to or hoping to get hired by a government organization, they have a love language, right? You're going to go to jobs.gov and they're going to express to you exactly how they want to see that resume written, and give you some guidance there, and we'll talk about that. But then if this is a private organization, if this is a tribal government versus tribal organization, they will have their different ways in which they prefer to see your resume. And then lastly, you've got private companies, and that's where it gets a little bit more creative, that you'll see the more casual organizations may actually like to see a resume that has some creativity included, some personalization included. Always consider the type of organization, as I said before, when you're looking at the position you're applying for, and then tailor the resume. This is the big takeaway here. Tailor it to make sure that it meets that specific organization. Those words that they're using in the job description is exactly what they'd like to see. Maybe not the exact words, but that the concepts, it confirms for them that you have the skills that they're looking for. So, for example, this is your first line of defense. Your email address is one surefire way of eliminating you from the applicant pool. You want to make sure that you have a professional email address. And it could be that you are making sure that there's no confusion between yourself and another candidate, right? I like to keep it separate and actually create a new inbox. I know that today it's a little harder to get your name per se, but there are ways around it. But we don't want crazy for cats, Harley dude, I like bears. Very fun, but not appropriate for a resume. And don't take for granted your soft skills, right? So communication, teamwork, adaptability, time management, keywords, right? If this is a customer service position, you would put something like these are the customer service centric skills that I have, right? Able to troubleshoot, things of that nature. Remote work skills also highly valuable in today's market, so it's really important that you detail that as well. As I said before, government versus nonprofit versus organizations or private companies. Um, the neat thing is that these systems are highly powered, right? You can go into the system and save your favorite jobs. You can go into the system, upload your resume, meaning you can upload different resumes for different positions. You never want to use the same resume for all the applications. They should be tailored to meet each job description. You can make your resume in the system as well. So going back to them telling you what they need to see, this is it. And then applying for the jobs directly through the system. So also very helpful. If it's a nonprofit, sometimes that they have the capacity to have a similar resume uploading system. Sometimes they don't, right? So it just kind of depends. But I would say whenever possible, pulling the annual report from a nonprofit is invaluable. You are going to gain so much knowledge in regards to what their mission, their vision is for their nonprofit, the service, the clients that they serve. Right, you're going to know about the program benefits. Right, what services do they provide? How do they provide them? What's their outreach look like? How many? In this case, right here on the first page, I can see, how many businesses have been funded, et cetera. You can see who their funders are, right? Where the money came from. Also very important. So it gives you a wealth of knowledge, and that leg up is important. It's going to make you much more comfortable with the organization if you get to the interview stage. And the same is true of private organizations. A lot of times, so this particular organization, I see them all the time because they're actually based in Douglasville, Georgia, but they are a Native American women-owned business. It's a trucking service provider, both refrigerated and non, very commercial in nature, but their website provides all sorts of information. So the first thing I did was go to the About Us page where I got, who they serve, how they serve their both clients and their employees, which is also helpful to know, right? So you kind of have to be a sleuth, put on your thinking cap, and look through this information with an evaluator's eyes, excuse me. So going back to the government positions, you'll see here that here's a position from one of my clients for a grant evaluation specialist, right? So it's going to give you a wealth of knowledge in terms of when the position opened and when it closed. And I will say that if you're going to Indeed or Glassdoor or some of the other portals where jobs live, you will see the similar things: salary, pay scale, locations, if there are any other than the one. You'll see these same sort of things. Very helpful in determining what works best for you, right? Considering your um, current place. I will say that a lot of people are scared because they're looking for a job. Maybe they currently have a job. How does that work? It's really important to know that on the application itself, it will typically they ask, "Can I contact this employer?" Which gives you some protection on that front, so that your current employer doesn't necessarily have to know about your job search. Um, Going back to this grants management specialist, the other thing I wanted to highlight is that I can track this application. I see when this applicant applied. I can see that it closed with 90 applicants. Hint, hint. I can also see what my competition looks like, right? Which is helpful. At curbing the anxiety, I think that's the thing. Sometimes when we didn't know this information, it kind of felt like, you felt like there were probably hundreds of people eligible for this particular job. Considering how many openings there were, 90 applicants isn't so bad. I like the chances, right, for this client. I see someone has applied just 2 weeks ago and another one a month ago. Was Let's see, how can I ask this question? What was the hardest part of the resume writing process for you once you selected the position, or you thought you'd be a good fit for that particular position? What was the hardest resume section for you? Let's see here. Oh, thank you, Native Learning Center, for putting Canva in there. Yeah. As we go, we're going to look at a couple different alternatives to what we already know about resumes. Getting accurate information from client to add to the resume, right? So that's part of it. If you're helping students or people returning to the workforce with information, that can it feels like it's pulling teeth, right? To say, tell me more about yourself. Because so this is why the brainstorming ahead of time is good, kind of breaking it apart and saying, okay, tell me about your work, your work, the tasks. It could be small things, right? I had to take the garbage out every Monday, right? I had a list of responsibilities that I had to do, routine routine skills that, or excuse me, tasks that I had to do. And then I also had the opportunity to develop my own schedule, which that flexibility allowed me to think of other things to do with my position, right? So it just means you've got to keep asking questions. There's a I'll see if I can find it and send it to the Native Learning Center, but there's a motivational interviewing style where you ask questions so that the clients can start to think about themselves in a different way, right? Because sometimes it's that they just don't think the position was really that um, glamorous, and so they already have a negative perspective when they're answering your questions to some extent. So I'll definitely look that up and try to send it in the chat, maybe at the end of the presentation. I'm pretty sure I have it on my computer. Um, let's see. Skylar also applied a month ago. So yeah, if you want to put something that was difficult for you, how to be detailed and precise without being too lengthy or wordy. Yeah, it's definitely a balance. And this is a good place to segue because when you're doing a government resume, they actually want you to be wordy. They want you to include a summary of qualifications, your KSAs, your knowledge, skill, and abilities. They want narratives on those things. They'll ask you for specific examples of how you demonstrated those abilities. And in grants.gov, it'll say like keep the resume to no more than 5 pages, which the industry standard is 1 page, right? If you're in the private sector, that's not the case. Definitely shouldn't exceed 2 pages, but in most cases, again, um, going back to that automated system, they would prefer it to scan the 1 page and move on, right? So focusing on showcasing relevant skills and accomplishments quickly and efficiently is the name of that game. So you're absolutely right there that um, there a balance that needs to be created. The other thing is keywords and jargon. So in a governmental resume, um, there are certain keywords, right, or specific examples that you would need to set. And once you've set up the paragraph to include NAHASDA, for example, NAHASDA's Native American Self-Determination Act, then I would just use NAHASDA moving forward, right? In a governmental resume, that's how that works. You know, if a project work plan, you would spell it out the first time, and then you can use PWP from that point forward. These keywords are used in the automated applicant tracking system. And again, they're used to that environment. That's how government agencies speak to each other. And so it won't be an issue in that regard. I included the 2020 Indian Housing Development Handbook because I know when I was new, I didn't understand. I'm like IHP, APR, I don't know what any of these things are. And people would just rattle them off like it was, um, you know, just really easy. Low income housing tax credit, right? LITHC. It's just, there's so many acronyms that it's hard to follow. So if you go to the handbook, there's a terms section that I really think is valuable to you all, and you can look at that to kind of get the jargon, the lingo down, understand what some of these positions are calling for, because they will include that. That grants management position had some information, had some work that would be closely related to the Indian Housing Community Development Block Grant funds. You'd be evaluating that resource, and so, or that grant itself. And yeah, they had ICDBG in there like tons of times. And so certainly if you're applying for that position, then you need to have that confidence to know exactly what they're talking about and put that in the resume as it relates to the work you want to do. In a private sector resume, not so much, right? You need to not use specific jargon because you want to use industry specific keywords, but not necessarily acronyms and things of that nature, because you don't know if the interviewer or that preliminary screener, it's a better way to put it, is specific to your industry. What do I mean by that? So at the Seminole Tribe of Florida, it's a very large tribal government, and there's pre-screeners, individuals that will provide put it through the applicant tracking system. They may decide, and again, this is just a generic version of the system. I don't have the secret sauce to Seminole Tribe of Florida's hiring process. But what I will say is that, once it's done through that system and those individuals who rise to the top are decided on, then that particular person may schedule the interview and be in the interview with the rest of the department, right? So you might have a person from the department who knows exactly what industry they're in. It could be education, housing, healthcare, whatever the case is. And then you've got this human resource generalist, right? The person who's going to be asking questions just to balance industry specific questions with those questions that are important to the organization. And again, your resume is trying to get you to that point. So it's kind of hard to talk about resumes without talking about interviews, but you can see the benefit. Structure and sections. So in a government resume, of course, it's more strategic. You're definitely more likely to want to put an objective, summary of qualifications, work experience, education, references. They ask you to add references. In a private situation, some of these things can be omitted. Like I said before, objective may not be there. Work experience is almost always there. There isn't a time when I think it wouldn't be there unless you don't have any, in which case you can argue that you could drop work, put experience, and still provide all those elements to the volunteer work that you've done, or to the schoolwork itself. Maybe you have been an intern somewhere, so those skills are still applicable. It's just you wouldn't call it work experience. Education and skills, we have sections for that. So I'll just remind everyone that those are still part of the process, and you would add those to the sections as well. I will say that sometimes templates and structure don't mix, and you have to start all over again. And that's true of any resume where you didn't build the template yourself. Sometimes dates and things like that will come out funky. My best practice is to always, always, always print it out. After you've put in some information, print it out and see what it looks like, because it doesn't always look how we want it to, or how it looks on the screen versus once it's printed. Attachments. So government resumes typically will have you attach additional documentation, whether that's transcripts or other forms, as a part of your application. In the private sector, you would put something like referrals available upon request, and that they would get that information either through an application. I also see people say, we want you to submit your resume and fill out our application. Much of this information is duplicated, but it's how they want you to move forward with that process. So now we're going to go to the resume basics by section, and that should give you some more clarity on what to include in each area. So of course you have your most common list, right? As I said before, objective is optional. Honors, activities, and skills also optional. References optional. But then sometimes there's unique categories, right? You might have technical skills. If you are in the tech industry, you might have Java and all these other technical related skills that require a separate category. So just keep that in mind. But yeah, your heading, name, address, city, state. This is actually the one of the biggest mistakes that are made because of formatting, right? What you think you're sending and what you send is actually two different things online. So this is why I think it's so important to print it out. The end user, what does it look like when they see it, is important. So just remember that when you're picking out a template. Objective. This one we're going to spend some time on because really it's that first opportunity that you have. We talked about impression, and your first impression objective is it, right? So it's the thesis statement of your resume. Why are you applying? It should be tailored to each application, so it's not a one size fits all thing. The career objectives should be brief and concise. So I would say no more than 2 sentences, 3 sentences at best. Objectives are optional, as I said, but can be very helpful. So the way you build an objective is first you focus on you, right? What knowledge, skills, abilities, education, or goals do I have that focus on the situation or the position in this case? So the position itself, the type of organization, or the target stakeholder. So what do I mean by stakeholder? Well, if you're in a if you're applying to a private organization or company, then in that case, they're clients, right? They want to know how what you do will benefit their target audience. So building it based on that means that, for example, I have here a candidate who wants to get into Georgette Palmer Smith School of Business. And so that's the objective, to gain admittance, right? You know, before it or after it, I would add a skill set that benefits them, right? That based on their education, maybe, for example, it looks like this person might um, already have some work experience. So they could put something like knowledgeable manager, program manager, interested in admittance to Georgette Palmer Smith School of Business. That could be one way of kind of tailoring it and adding that piece that's missing. But the purpose is there, to gain admittance to the school itself. This next one, to secure an internship with the Cheyenne River Housing Department. So it's very specific as to what they want to do and assist in affordable housing activities for Cheyenne River Sioux tribal communities, right? So it's also giving a shout out to that end user, right? Who's going to get the benefit of the services that I wish to provide, right? Or to support. I like that it included affordable housing activities. I know what that interest is now in my department, right? As the person reading it. Let's look at this last one. Strong project manager seeking construction management position. Well, this person has project management experience already. I know that. I know they're interested in my position. What else do I know? They possess 10 years of affordable housing community development experience. So 2 sentences that, and in the end, display the strength of the applicant. And I may choose to read on based on that, or I could say, you know what, that's great, but it doesn't necessarily meet. I've had maybe those skill sets before, and I'm looking for something else, right? So it just kind of depends on the reviewer. But I will say, if this language was in the actual job description, it would be very helpful to the candidate. Any questions about objective before I move on? All right. So now we're going to go to education. You want to put the name of the degree, date of degree, name and location of institution. So people usually stop me there and say, what about high school, right? Maybe I don't have a college degree just yet, or not at all. So what do I do? Well, you want to put your high school information if it's necessary to the position, right? So if it requires a high school degree, then put that, just so they know that you have a high school degree, the date of the degree. You don't need to go into any other specifics. They're not necessarily looking for, especially depending on the number of years since the degree, what you have regarding the name and the date is fine. If you do have a degree, then you want to try to tailor it down to minor concentrations if you have any. This overall GPA, that's only if it's best for you, right? 4.0 or higher. 3.0, it could be a helpful thing. In most cases, I'd say omit it. Um, Relevant coursework, study abroad experiences, academic honors. These are all better suited if you're going for some sort of internship that shows the level of interest you have in that specific industry, right? But if it's just that you needed to have a degree, then the name and location is enough. Um, Formatting. So in regards to formatting, um, this is the information you need to know regarding margins, fonts, font size, white space, and length, right? These are the best practices on that. I do know that templates sometimes change things up. Um, at some point, I just decided to make my own because I could manipulate it like I wanted. Templates can be a major source of frustration. I don't know, when you're given a specific area and you're told write in this area, and then not everything um, necessarily aligns. It can be very frustrating, and then you're playing with it to make it work. What I would suggest is, if you can and you're comfortable with Word, try to create your own. And so this will help you with that. So going back to Skylar's question, the art of being selective, quality over quantity. So that would be my suggestion to you, is to evaluate whether you can say what you need to say in less words, right? And there is an AI opportunity there that can help you with that. So I'll get there. Cover letter can provide more details, right? So that's another option. You're going to provide a resume and a cover letter, then let your resume be selective and precise to the point. Let your cover letter kind of gloss over some of these additional details you wanted to add or you felt was necessary. Resume grows with experience, right? So sometimes you can't include, as you get um, what's the word I want to use? As you season, right? Um, then at that point, you might want to drop bullet points from some of your less recent activity, right? Emphasize words, and there's a couple ways to do it, but be consistent. That's what I'll say about this, right? So you can italicize, you can bold things. All caps is an option. I'm not crazy about it, but there are some templates where that's the case because of the font itself. Location, location, location. That's just very important. You'll see that I use the space in between to create some sort of to make sure that folks can clearly understand where I was headed next. And then the use of white space. Very, very important to the resume process, because again, those things will help the automated system catch what you need to say easier than just if it's plain text. The common resume mistakes, misspelling and typos. That's going to be huge. We want to make sure that there's no misspelling and typos, too short or too long. If it's brief, find alternative ways to say what you need to say and add information. Go back to your brainstorming to do that. If it's too long, cutting it down to size. I like to say, sometimes I'm just too close to it, right? I need to take a break, walk away. I need to give it to a colleague, in this case, not a colleague, but maybe like a friend or a person that you trust that can review it and give you some feedback. Maybe you thought what you were saying was clear, and in the case of your friend, they let you realize it's clearer than mud, right? So overwritten. Sometimes you're saying things one too many times. It's the same thing being said several times over. So just be careful with that. Too sparse. Going back to what made it too short is that for one section, there could be a lot of things that you could say about a specific position, and you didn't elaborate, right? There's opportunity for elaborate. That's one of the notes I would put on a resume. Um, and it could be something you said. You worked on a project um, to increase increase grant opportunities, right, for your community. Elaborate on that. I want to know more, right? If this is a position that is heavily reliant on grant monies, I want to know more, right? So just think about it from that perspective. Um, Contains irrelevant information. There could be a lot of that as well. Going back to the reasons why resumes are sometimes too long. Content doesn't match the objective, right? Going back to the job profile itself, what did it say that you needed to have or wanted to that it needs you to have? You would need to look at that as well. Personal pronouns, um, I think, I feel, really should be in the third person. Articles and full sentences, and then not and when I say full sentences, it needs to be, they call it like stellar writing. And you can go to any college resume foundations kind of website, and it'll show you that there's a way in which you're writing the sentence that could be either active or passive. So that's what I mean by that. I'll talk about it a little bit here as well. But past tense versus present tense. Certainly, if you're currently in a position, it would be present tense. Whereas if it's a past position, then past tense makes much more sense. So just being mindful of that, because sometimes you're in the throes of writing and you just want everything to be the same, right? And you're not necessarily paying attention to those elements. Tech tools that'll assist with your stellar writing, right? So the thing is with AI is that you've already been using it. If you've ever been on your phone and it completed the sentence for you, it's like, oh, I know what you meant, right? Autocorrect. Where do you think they were headed with that? It's been coming for a long time. We saw it in our emails. One day my email just suggested, hey, is this what you wanted to say? I'm like, sure, keep it moving. Like now I can move on to the next thing. So revising resumes can be time consuming. I already mentioned the fact that you are going to be um, writing your resume, evaluating your resume for each position, right? And there could be several positions that caught your eye that you think speak to you. So in that case, you have to tailor them. And I know it'll take time. So artificial intelligence saves time. That's the number one thing. You can quickly generate the content from the resume based on prompts you give it. So if you've ever heard the saying garbage in, garbage out, AI is only as good as what you put in. So if your questions are vague, write me a resume. That's not going to work. You have to decide on what you want to provide it. And I've done webinars about AI in the past, so I will make the disclaimer that there are issues in regards to personal data. So I would omit personal information about yourself. But in terms of it evaluating the value, the strength of a sentence, for example, or another way of wording the sentence, those types of things, is where you can really benefit. So customize the skills, quickly matches your experience with the position details. It'll do it in seconds. Identify strengths. Maybe you can put in a generic brainstorm concept of what you did at a job, and then it'll spit out, well, these are the strengths that I see, right? Based on what you did at that job. And then it increases your chances of success in terms of tailoring the resume, right? But it can also force errors. It's assisting you in recreating a well-written job description, meaning you already had something to work off of. And so it can showcase your skills, but you don't want to force any errors. You need to make sure you're evaluating what it spits back out to you, right? Garbage in, garbage out. So these are the two main ones as of today that are still free. As these systems get bigger and better and brighter, of course, there's going to be paid versions of them. But Chat, OpenAI, and Bard, Google.com are the main actors in this. Chat GPT, I think, is Microsoft. I'm not entirely sure about that. But here I've got Bard open, and what I asked it was I want 5 short and in bullet form reasons to use Grammarly. So it gave me 5 reasons to use Grammarly. So AI helps, wink, wink. And I say that because you'll see this language again here shortly. With the resume prompts, as I said before, make sure to carefully proofread and edit each bullet point. Make sure it makes sense. You have to do the work of making sure it didn't put things out of context or may not have understood what you meant in the language that you used. AI tools are intelligent, but they're not foolproof. They are not. They are meant to assist you and hopefully get you to check some of this work that you're going to be doing to tailor your resume with more efficiency. It just makes it a little bit faster. And also too, that you have the experience that the AI says you do, it can get it wrong. So double check for spelling, grammar, punctuation, and clarity. Let's see here. So for example, help me with my resume. Give me 5 other ChatGPT prompts to assist in resume writing. So essentially, this is ChatGPT now, 2 different AIs. But in this particular case, I'm asking it to provide me with what I would say to it. So in the case of a professional summary, maybe I've written one and I've given it to them already, right? So you have to know that from the jump. I put in the little chat area, I copy and pasted my summary. And then I say, compose a professional summary for my resume, highlight my key skills, accomplishments, career objectives in a concise paragraph. So take what I've written and make it better. The caveat to this is that it's going to spit something out and you have to do the editing to make sure it's exactly what you needed to say. So it's not an exact science, but it is helpful. Work experience, same thing. Provide a bullet point for my work experience section. Include details about my responsibilities, achievements, quantifiable results. This is very specific. You're starting to see that your commands, the more specific they are, the better the output. You might be stuck on education and certifications. How do I say this? Help me list my educational background and relevant certifications training. Very, very specific. Then it'll do that for you, and so on and so forth. So it can be very helpful. Grammarly is another helpful tool. With Grammarly, there is an AI function within Grammarly, but its primary function is to help you with grammar, spelling, and punctuation. Dangling participles, right? So just with Grammarly, it's what they call an extension. I don't want to get too into the tech part of this, but essentially it lives on the back of any one of your applications. So Word, if you're using Google Slides or Google, what's it called, Docs, then, Grammarly will live on the back end. You've given it access and it'll scan your language, whatever you're writing, to see if it makes sense to them. And then it'll give you suggestions and tell you how clear you are. It'll catch tone. It'll make a good impression in terms of error-free writing. But you also have to make sure that you're paying attention to copy paste errors, because that's typically what tends to happen with AI is that folks are like, this is great. Let me copy this whole thing out. And they're not seeing how it balances out with the rest of their resume, right? So just be careful with that. So with the time I have left, I'll go over the key resume skills for 2023. The first one is digital literacy. We talked a little bit about how things have changed over the last 2 years, and demonstrating digital literacy is, when it comes to knowledge, skills, and abilities, this is one of those things that's almost imperative. You have to have, right? Digital tools, understanding the platforms for communication. That doesn't mean you need to know everything there is to know about Zoom, but if there's communication tools, collaboration tools, problem-solving tools within an industry, it's really great if you can say that you are aware of them and that you know of them. Video conferencing, cloud-based software, project management tools. What comes to mind is things like Asana and Monday and these real-time project management tools, right? The easiest description of that Microsoft Teams has an element or also to what is it? Google. So Google Suite, like if you're working on a document, everybody else, as long as they have the link, can access that document and work in it, things of that nature. So having that ability to say that everyone on the team can see the agenda and manipulate the agenda is just a neat tool that you can demonstrate that you have this digital, and you can call it digital literacy. and elaborate on it based on that. Data analysis and interpretation. So this is decision making based on the data that's provided. And then also being able to draw out insights, right? So data analysis is something that you'll see employers ask for. You know, give me a time when you had a, you know, when you received information and you made a decision based on that information. What did it look like, right? Adaptability, uh, quickly learning in new environments, whether that's technology, tools, work environments. Think about your maintenance staff and some of the systems that they use. Maybe there was a time when you changed CRMs. That's your client management systems. Maybe there was a time you changed systems and you had to learn quickly. This is something you can demonstrate or add to your resume that shows adaptability. Certainly, going from your position in 2019 to your position in 2022, there are a lot of ways in which you adapted, and so you can, when you're brainstorming, think about that. Critical thinking and problem solving. This is nothing new. Certainly, employers are going to ask about a time when you had an issue that you needed to solve and the way in which you did so, right? So, um, you know, when I worked in professional development services, I had to put out surveys to both the departments and to the interns to kind of determine what's the best way um, to look at job placement outside the box, right? You know, because there's what the client says they want to do, and then there's the reality of what certain positions will require. So, you know, keeping that balance. Um, Other key resume skills for 2023 to highlight is the creative side. And I say that in that, you know, if you had to think outside the box, demonstrate that, right? Give me a time when. So think about a bullet point that demonstrates creativity, whether that's towards a project or problem solving. That doesn't mean, you know, your uh, your picture on the resume. It doesn't mean a different color for the or font on the resume. It just means just demonstrate that you have a creative side in some way. That's something we're seeing now more than before. Cultural competency, of course, you know, we work in Native communities. So in most cases, the folks here on this webinar. And so it's really helpful to demonstrate that you are familiar with the cultures in which you're working in, where, you know, and where it's appropriate to demonstrate that, right? So that experience is very helpful and something that employers need to see, especially if that's their biggest clientele. Leadership and management, of course, you know, those management skills that are necessary, team building, strategic thinking, strategic planning, things of that nature. You know, if I say SWOT analysis and you know what it is, which is your strengths, weaknesses, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. If you know that already and you're on that management track, then you need to demonstrate that in your resume as to all the ways you led your staff, your stakeholders, and in what way you did that is something that you want to include. So we're going to switch gears. Some of cover letter 101 is similar to resume, but this entices your readers so they want to read your resume. It's a little different in that it provides a human touch. It summarizes the major accomplishments and shows that you'll be an asset to the organization. Lastly, it compels the reader to want to interview you. And I will say this about cover letters. Why did we talk about it last if it's going to go first? Because you're going to get the information from your resume to write a more effective cover letter. I've seen folks do it the other way and it just it falls flat. And I think that's because they haven't decided on exactly what they want to say as far as their hard skills, things that the position will require versus soft skills, details that will help your things specific to you and your experience that benefits the position. So there's a little nuance there in why I think it's best to do your resume first and then your cover letter. So the first few sentences should entice the reader with general qualifications. The middle paragraph says why you're qualified for the position. Go back to Jack. Jack was like so great at letting folks know in the beginning that the position that he's looking for There's a reason, there's a purpose for it. I think I'd be great at this position, or this position fulfills the next step in my, education experience. Uh, the middle paragraph substantiate why you are qualified for the position. So all the things that you would find in like your experience section, pull out some of those highlights. And then lastly, that paragraph states a call to action, why they should consider you for the position itself. Another thing to note about cover letters is that there are different types. So, just be mindful of that. An application letter is written to apply to a specific job opening. That's the one we all know of. There's also referral cover letters, which mentions the person who referred the job to you. So you might need to put that in there just so that, again, going back to the automated system, if they know that there's a referral based system or points included, then it may help you rise to the top. And then sometimes you're saying, look, there isn't a position currently available for this in this department, but when one becomes available, I'd be interested. So you're doing what's called a letter of interest. You're letting people know that you're interested in possible job openings at a location. So things to include, the do's of cover letters is be direct and to the point. Keep it to one page. A cover letter shouldn't be more than that. Address it to a specific person, and you might say, well, how do I get that information? We are going to talk about that. Tailor the specific job. Recycle terms from the job announcement. This is a huge benefit to you rising to the top. And again, it doesn't necessarily mean exact words. It's just use your I would say that be mindful. You don't want to copy and paste exactly what's in the job description in your resume, but if there's another way of if there isn't another way of saying it, for example, emissions and occupancy is emissions and occupancy. There's no real way around that, right? So you would just put that in there. But if it's a program management position, and they're looking for certain skills like time management, organizational management, you might be able to nail that, narrow that down and just put program management, in which case it entails all of those skills. Sign the letter, of course. And then the don't be too or long-winded, as I said before. Don't try to flatter the employer. They know what they're doing well. And they don't necessarily need you to point it out. Use the same letter for multiple positions and then have those grammatical errors. That's a forced out, in my opinion. If they see errors, they're more likely to move on. So going into the experience section, um, it can be a list in one section or it can be broken into several sections, but you want to make sure that you don't make it exhaustive. It can't be so much that it's overwhelming. So start with work experience, related experience, volunteer experience, leadership experience. That's the order in which I would go. If I don't have work experience, then I want related experience. I want volunteer experience, and then leadership experience, of course, if it's outside of a professional environment. Um, Other things about experience is that it can be paid or non-paid, right? Internships matter, volunteering, community service, military service, of course, part-time and full-time work, on campus or off campus, almost everything is an experience. I say that because, again, going back to a mindset thing, and we'll talk about mindset a little bit in the last webinar, You're Hired. But your mindset is half the battle here. If you don't see any value in the positions that you've had in the past, then neither will the employer. So what you have to say about them matters. Okay, this is where we get into that passive versus active. So start with the most recent experience, work backwards. Each bulleted description, use an action verb. So I have a list of action verbs available to you. Let's see. I'll open it up and give you a few for you to think about, right? So, administered, analyzed, addressed, proposed, publicized, computed, regulated, repaired, facilitated, just explained. Things that will show that you were active in the process of doing X, Y, Z. Again, that present tense if you're in the position, past tense if you're not. try to include at least 2 to 3 bullet points under each section. I have seen it where people just put the one, and it just looks awkward, I think, to have one bullet point. So try to just um, reevaluate your position to add at least 2 to 3 bullets. Um, let's see here. Sorry, it's a little slow on my end. So here's a real short version of the 2-page document that I sent over. It's located in the file section below. Of course, if you speak other languages, and it benefits the organization, then for sure, or they've asked for that information, be sure to put it. And these skills that are relevant to the job you're seeking. Um, Optional categories have always been activities, awards, certifications, community service, computer skills. Now, if you're applying for a position in technology, then this no longer becomes optional category, right? So just keep that in mind. Depending on the industry, you'll need to detail that as well. Um, Personal data, this is something that I said I would come back to. So marital status or children, birth dates, health, your health, the health of family and friends, none of that matters in a resume. You'd be surprised sometimes people put that stuff. They put it in their cover letters as well. And that's a no-no there. I would say anything that's here is also what I would like to not see it in a cover letter. Photo, height and weight, willing to travel or relocate. If the job has a relocation option, then typically they want you to note that in the application, or they will note that in the job announcement itself, that travel is required, or a relocate, or this job does have a relocation. 88% of resumes are rejected because a photo is on a resume. So I know some people say, but they're so much better looking. Um, there's a lot of reasons to protect the organization and not put a cover letter. So, excuse me, a photo, so that they don't have any sort of discriminatory bias there. So there's a reason for that. So where are the jobs? Where do I look? How do I apply? It's kind of hard to talk about resumes without talking about how to look or where to look for jobs. And so online job searches are tricky because, if you put in program assistant, it's going to look for organizations that both paid and unpaid, right? Because Google is in it for the cash, in terms of paid advertisements. So it's important to, and all of them are like that. Indeed, Glassdoor, they all have a paid advertising version of what they provide you. So sometimes just putting the the information in those systems don't necessarily net you the best position. So just be mindful of that. You might have to go a couple pages in to find the program assistant position you're really looking for, the company you really like to work with. Unfortunately, just like any search, the paid ones kind of are on the top or in the first couple searches there, and you may not get all your options. So going into Indeed, if you haven't, it's probably the largest. It used to be monster.com and all the monster jobs and all these other things. They've kind of all morphed into Indeed, which is a popular search engine, and it aggregates the jobs that are out there. It's Glassdoor is a little bit different in that it gives people information based on the individuals who already work for the organizations. So hence the term Glassdoor. It gives you some more information. Some employers like it. I think most employers have embraced it. I don't know if they like it or not, because it can both provide positive and negative feedback in regards to the job, the culture of the organization. What folks have liked about working at a company. And it could be something as simple as they don't offer flexible hours, or they don't provide remote work, etc. Or it could be, it's just one person's viewpoint of that employer. So there's that. And I will say, and then LinkedIn is the last one, and we're going to park it here for a little bit with LinkedIn, because you need it. Even though you're not giving them your LinkedIn profile necessarily, you can. I have had clients that choose to include that. Depending on the industry, it might be a valuable tool, especially if your job is going to require networking. Then what best way to display to the recruiter that you are a natural born networker than how well your LinkedIn is perceived. So the thing about all three of these um, is that when you're looking for the job itself, you need to make sure that you understand the organization, that you're researching job titles, positions, and salaries, determining career goals. Because again, you're kind of going to get off track here, right? You start with one position, then you go down a rabbit hole. And I know that it's work to find work. So you're going to have to be diligent in making sure you stay on the right path, because at some point you start to think, well, maybe I can do this other job or this other position here, and it takes you kind of off course, and it's like that by design, so you stay on the site. So just be careful with that. Research careers based on your education, your volunteer, your work experience, interest, not like who's in the organization, and that sort of thing. Culture, of course, is important, but it's not how you want to base your selection, your job description selection off of, right? It should be something where they match up. Reach out to your social media network. Sometimes it's easy to say, hey, do you know of any positions that are becoming available? People talk. A lot of times they'll say, I know so and so might be leaving, and they'll put that in a direct message to you or something like that. So sometimes you get the heads up that there's a position coming up, and that gives you an opportunity to update your resume ahead of time before the position goes live. So be a job description detective, right? Make sure you understand the position title, name of organization's location, open and effective date, right? When did it open? Closing date, submission requirements. You've got to do the work. And here we are saying that you're going to apply for several positions. That's a lot of work to make sure that you are designing your resume based on what each culture or each company needs to see, right? So in the case of a company's mission, values, culture, recent news, why does all of that matter? Because if you do get to the interview stage, they're going to ask you, what do you know about our company? It's like one of the most common questions. So you might as well just start now. Once it's time to apply, gather all your information, make sure you have a well-crafted cover letter, a digital copy of things that you might need. Yes, it's hard. It's hard because going back to that grants.gov page, you're only given a certain period of time to apply. And if you don't have these items readily available or ready, it could hold you back, right? So just be mindful of that. Creating that strong online presence. So I said we're going to talk about LinkedIn, and here's why. Recruiters do go to LinkedIn and other social media sites to learn more about you. You know, in the case of Facebook, it doesn't tell you, but LinkedIn will say, you've had so many views on your page. So just be mindful of that. It gives you an opportunity to talk about your skills, your experiences, your career aspirations on your profiles. Also, clean it up. If content is considered unprofessional, you might say, well, it's my private page, and if that's what they see, what you see is what you get, right? I will say, for the purpose of applying for a job or several jobs, folks are going to be paying attention to these things because they also have a right and a role to protect the organization itself. So just be mindful of that. Follow application instructions. So carefully read the job posting and follow application instructions. Some employers may ask for some things that others don't. So follow the rules. Make sure you're paying attention to that. One size does not fit all. That applicant tracking system, the ATS, make sure you're paying attention to the fact that, if you're using the last job description, then it doesn't have those keywords. Proofread your application, print it out, give it time, walk away from it. It'll save you a world of heartache, because once you hit submit, there's usually no way of getting it back. I have seen undo in our email. I'm sure that one day we'll be able to hit undo in some of these resume uploading systems. But until then, it's one and done. Once you submit it, that's it, and there's no getting it back. So just be careful with that. Keep track of your applications. You're going to submit the application and go about your day. You have personal lives. You're going to do what you need to do. And then one day you're going to get a random phone call and not know who or what they're talking about. So maintain a record of the jobs you've applied for, name, position, application. Why does that matter? Because when you're speaking to that person, you want to be able to be knowledgeable enough to say, who would I address my cover letter to? Where, some follow-up information that might be needed. You'll be able to collect that information when you hear from them over the phone. Or even when you get an email, you're like, okay, I remember this resume, but this was 3 months ago. Because sometimes it does take time. That's why you need to be patient. It's now hundreds of applications for one position are the norm. So it's really important that you follow up, right? If you don't receive a response within a reasonable time frame, you can consider sending an email to express continued interest. Make sure your email has a signature or something that can identify you over others. I have seen emails that's like, did you get my email? Did you get my resume? Okay, well, I don't have any other information on here except for I like cats at email.com, right? So just be careful with that. Prepare for interviews as best you can ahead of time. And this is one of those things we're going to talk about in tomorrow's webinar. I will say protect your personal information. So be careful about sharing information because you only want to put information that's relevant to your position. I've seen social security numbers on resumes and other personal things that just shouldn't be there. Job application process can take time, so you have to be patient for folks to get back to you. And so in time, what is it? I was going to say in waiting, the best thing to do is to clean up your LinkedIn. So with the last couple minutes that we have, we'll talk a little bit about LinkedIn. So LinkedIn has 3 new members per second. And all of this was updated May 15th of this year. 900 million users worldwide. So it's an international company for sure. It's going to have positions all over the world and people inputting information about positions all over the world. 202 million are here in the US. Over 16% of the users log in every day, which means 141 million people log in every day to LinkedIn. 50% of LinkedIn users take home more than $75,000 a year. So this is where those folks that have jobs, this is where they live, right? And why is that? Because it can increase visibility if you're working for yourself or if you're working to grow your company's network. Then of course being in this space is helpful. Creates outlets to gain new leads, connect with vendors, with past and future partners. Different tribal communities. This is where, their professionals are. And so you can ask them about projects they're working on and things like that. It's just a neat way to kind of connect. Sometimes we're in a very small community where sometimes you see people with the same titles and you don't know exactly, what, maybe you're new. This is a great way to connect. So that if you did have a question one day, you might feel comfortable enough to ask in this platform. It builds trust in the brand that you have the skills that you say you have, right? So when the recruiter goes to LinkedIn and they see your work history and they see all of the former employees that you've worked with, it establishes that you are strong in the industry that you work in. Some of your posts, right? For myself, for example, I follow Enterprise, I follow OESTA, I follow several tribal intergovernmental organizations, right? Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, organizations that matter to homeownership. And so that will show that I'm committed to the industry, right? Allow for you to demonstrate your expertise and let people endorse you. I mean, that's the neatest thing I find about LinkedIn. So building your profile, we're going to talk a lot about building your profile out in next webinar, the next webinar, right? And the reason why is because by the time you get an interview, Hopefully it'll be ready to go, but your profile should have a couple things. So at the very top, let me get my arrow. Bear with me. I've got two screens. All right. So right here, you're going to see my heading, right? National Housing Trainer, local expert realtor. Those are the hats that I currently wear. Here, of course, it says that I am the co-owner of Seminole Armor Homes, and it gives you an opportunity to go there where you'll find out about my general contracting side, right, of the business. Over here, it's going to list all the people that I know and work with, and it's going to suggest things to me to build out my profile. So that's a little bit about that section. So the secret to a strong LinkedIn profile is that your profile is in addition to your resume. So you can't build a LinkedIn if you don't have a resume yet. You have to start with your resume, then your cover letters, and then work backwards. And not necessarily your cover letter for a specific one, but it's always good to kind of create something that you can work off of to build new ones. You're creating a social media profile, so you're not copying and pasting your resume. This is a marketing tool. So this is just frosting on your cake. LinkedIn profile checklist. I've provided this to you to kind of give you an idea of all the different sections it's going to ask you about. But the main thing is the photo. You want to make sure you choose something professional. I have seen selfies on there. This is not a good look. The summary, it's your elevator pitch, right? That 30 seconds of what do they need to know about you. You'll notice that I didn't have, every bullet point just yet. I just decided on the three main hats that I wear. Experience and skills, there's a place for that. Just like your resume, interest groups and associations are cool. The neat thing about LinkedIn is it lets you connect to those interests, and so you can physically see, the schools I went to or the groups that associations I'm a part of, etc. And then recommendations and endorsements, also neat because it'll allow you to show that peer-to-peer evaluation. These individuals know that I can do what I say I can do. So again, we'll talk more about LinkedIn next week. This is just kind of like a teaser. But again, here in the headshots area, you can definitely see that having a headshot, I may use this for training. I may use this for marketing, etc. Different headshots for different reasons. And LinkedIn, depending on what I need to portray on my LinkedIn, I will choose one that works best. As far as value added, that's what LinkedIn is all about, creating that experience with me where you're seeing what I have done in the past, and then not just duties and responsibilities or tasks, but more of application. Here's what I did with that. Here's what I did with my tasks. How I increased, for example, resumes. When you're in your resume, you can put that you increased sales or you increased GED applications or GED approval rates, right? Things like that. But the how you did it, that is something that you don't necessarily see in a resume. So in my LinkedIn, I can elaborate. If you're a student, here's another percentage that I thought was important to include. 41% of hiring managers consider volunteer experience equally as valuable as paid work experience. So, you don't necessarily have to fret that. It's not going to matter. I do think that there's value in the experience that you had. Growing your network, ask to connect is like asking for a business card. Most folks don't realize that LinkedIn you only have so many connections that you can make. So be selective. I think I want to say the number's 3,000, which seems like a lot, but it's really not over a lifetime. So be careful with growing your network. You got to make sure that it makes sense. There are going to be folks that connect with you that are trying to recruit, not necessarily something. Maybe you're not interested in going to a new business school or something like that. So just be selective when you go to start reaching out. And then growing your network when you connect with folks via LinkedIn. You can do it by school. So here I have FIU, which is the school I went to, and I could start there if I just started my LinkedIn. The main thing is you connect with current employers, clients, friends, professional connections. You introduce contacts to one another. So I've had to do that at times. And then also I engage. They'll post things that are interesting to me, and then I'll engage with them on the post. I'll endorse any skills with others. So it's a give and take relationship. You can't expect people to endorse you if you haven't endorsed them, right? So think about that and spend some time on there. The main thing to know about LinkedIn is that the more you give, the more you get, right? So, I had to put some time into developing a comprehensive LinkedIn. So that way I'm seeing the content I need to see. I'm seeing the activity from the different communities that I serve. And I'm also networking with the individuals that I see, in tribal housing. I see them at conferences and things like that. I don't see them as often. So it's neat that we have this place or space that we um, can connect. Let's double check on chat. We're good on time too. Reminder to use your active voice. So this is huge, even in LinkedIn. That and this is an example of it. Monthly financial reports were generated by me. Yeah, I generated the financial reports. I, in this particular case, generated monthly financial reports. It's strong and it's to the point and it's active. This is a activity that I did and I'm putting it out there. Generated monthly financial reports, period. That's better than, this passive uh, example. I thought this was funny, so I included it. Most resumes end up in the trash. Mine is in your belly, right? Going back to how much creativity you can put in a resume, this is probably the extreme. This particular individual was in marketing, and this is for a marketing position. So he tailored his resume to fit the needs of the position. So I don't blame him in this particular case. Make sure that on your resume that you've done the same. In terms of the next step, um, hopefully based on a stellar resume, you get the job interview, and that's something that's going to have its own set of preparations that we're going to talk about here in a little bit. So starting tomorrow, same time, 2 p.m., we're going to go over the job interview process, how to prepare for initial contact, right? Updating your voicemail, social media, business attire, like what is all included in that. We're going to talk about what to collect from the caller, right? Or the email, how to respond to the email itself, as far as thanking them for the opportunity, and what to do next. So, in summary, definitely format your resume so that sections are clear and concise. Read the job description, print that out, highlight all those keywords. Make sure that when you turn it back in, it's going to have that strength of active verbs, of active tone and voice that we just talked about. Simplify, would be my best. My suggestion to you all is to simplify whenever possible, because less is always more in the case of the strength of a resume, especially if you have 25 years experience, so think about it from that perspective. And if you don't have a whole lot to say, then of course use the tools that we talked about today that can help you um, pull out some of the skills that you maybe have missed. Let your cover letter show its personalized touch, and sell your value that you will bring to the company. So I've included a couple resume development resources. So of course, college, this is an untapped resource. College, university, career advising, and professional development websites give you tons of information in regards to resume writing. And I usually ask my clients to visit those sites as well. I didn't put any one, I'm not I'm not advocating for one over another, but I mean, you can Google just about any tribal college or large colleges in your area. That way it's very specific to the industries in your area and the work that you all do. So I kept that one generic. Of course, the AI opportunities that are out there, I put those in there. Indeed has a whole career and advice section, school, if you will, that will give you resources and specifically on cover letters. I included that as well. And then USA Jobs, I wanted to make sure that you saw their what to include section, because with USA Jobs, it can be hard to kind of get where you need to go. It's a government, it's just built that way. So I wanted to make sure you had that as well. So now let's go to the chat. We'll see if there are any additional questions in the chat for me. If not, I appreciate your time and I will be back tomorrow so you can think on it. And then for sure, come back tomorrow with any questions you might have. These are the trainings that I provide. Primarily, there's some others that are on there, but less is more. You can email me if you have a question specifically. Do you recommend paying for LinkedIn? That's a good question. I personally do not, and I have, as a consultant, I've worked in tribal governments and I've worked independently on my own, and I've been able to not pay for it for several years and still network in a way that's efficient. So I don't necessarily think it's necessary. A lot of times with the LinkedIn paid versions, you're able to just see who's viewed your application, your profile, and I don't know that that's a value to me. But so that would be my take, is that I'm not, especially if you're looking for a job, don't spend any extra money. Like in that particular arena on financial wellness side of things, I say, use the free versions to the best of your abilities. So that's my answer there. Yeah, save some pennies. Any other questions? If not, then I will send it back over to the Native Learning Center, and for sure I'll be back tomorrow at 2 o'clock so we can talk more about the interview process.
All right. Thank you so much, Marie, for your time and effort. I know everybody certainly learned a lot. As I close out the webinar, guys, if you think of any other questions or comments you want to send in, feel free to do so in the chat box now. Marie, it looks like you're getting some love and thanks in there. Real quick, guys, I am going to go ahead and launch today's survey for you. We ask that you please complete it. It takes just a minute or so, and your feedback really helps us to do more of what's working well and improve upon what's needing it. We really invite you to be as candid as you like, because the survey is anonymous, but it helps us. We give the feedback to Marie, it helps her. It's good all around. Help us keep doing what we're doing here. As Marie said, the next segment of her webinar series on tribal housing professionalism is going to be right back here tomorrow. Registration is free. It's going to be same time, 2 to 3:30 p.m. And feel free to access this and any of our other recorded webinars online on our website, www.nativelearningcenter.com. We have a Catheta webinars tab featuring a recorded webinars section. You can click on any one of the webinars that we've done for the past 2 years. Feel free to view them, share them with your friends and colleagues. And please also check out our upcoming events posted to our various social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn, incidentally. We even have a podcast titled Hoothing, a Native American Podcast, where we discuss focused topics within tribal housing and self-determination. You guys can listen to that on Simplecast, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and you can also view the video recordings with our guests on YouTube. So once again, we want to thank all of you so much for being here with us today. Thank you again, Marie, for the amazing presentation. And guys, I'm going to go and put my email in the chat box. So if you are wanting a copy of a PDF of Marie's slides, you can email me to request that. But otherwise, I hope everybody has a fantastic rest of the day, and we will see you back here tomorrow, 2 p.m. Thanks so much, everybody. I'm going to shut down the recording now.